Okay, so this morning, the President of the United States went on television and threatened to seize a waterway and charge tolls on the ships passing through it. He said that if Iran does not make a deal, America may simply take over the Strait of Hormuz and collect a fee from every vessel. He told Iranian officials in his own words that if they close the strait, they will not have a country. And if that is the only thing you absorb today, it sounds like dominance. It sounds like a superpower laying down the law. It sounds like strength. I want you to stop. I want you to put that sentence down for a moment, and I want you to read a second list with me, slowly. While the president was threatening to take the strait, his own Treasury Department quietly suspended the sanctions on Iranian oil. Not in 60 days. Now, while he was promising to make Iran pay, the frozen Iranian assets were already being unlocked. While he was warning that Iran will not have a country, the strait that Iran had closed was reopened, and the oil tankers started moving again. And while every headline writer on the planet was typing the words inspections and breakthrough, the Iranians had agreed to almost nothing. Their president stood up the same week and said plainly that Iran will never give up its right to enrich uranium, and that the other side will simply have to accept it. So now I want you to ask yourself a question, and I mean actually ask it. Do not just keep listening. Does a winner threaten, or does a winner simply collect? Because a man who has won does not need to go on television and warn you that you will cease to exist. He does not need to talk about tolls. You talk about tolls when the leverage is gone, and the only thing you have left is the microphone. What happened over the last week is not a deal that America won. What happened is that America started a clock, a 60-day clock. And once you understand how that clock was built, and crucially, which direction it runs, you will understand that the threats you heard this morning are not the sound of a superpower in control. They are the sound of a superpower that has already paid and is now waiting and is just beginning to realize that the waiting was the entire trap. Let me show you exactly how. Before I go further, let me say the same thing I always say because some of you are new here. I am not a spy. I do not work for any government. I do not have secret sources. I do not have a team. I am not being briefed by anyone. I am one person, sitting here, reading the same wire reports and the same public statements that you can read yourself and trying to use history and game theory to understand what is happening underneath the headlines. That is all this is. And I am not here to tell you that Iran is good and America is evil. That is not the argument. I am not making a moral argument at all. I am making a structural one. I am going to show you the architecture of this agreement, the order in which things were given and received, and I am going to let that architecture tell you who is actually holding the leverage. If you disagree with me, good. Push back. That is how all of us get sharper. Okay? Let us build the framework. Here is the framework, and it is the single most important idea in this entire video. If you understand this one mechanism, you will never read a diplomatic agreement the same way again. In any serious negotiation, and especially in arms control, there's a principle that governs everything. The principle is verify, then reward. You go first. You demonstrate that you have actually done the thing you promised. I verify it, and only then do I give you what you want. You show me yours and then I show you mine. This is not a moral rule. It is a leverage rule. Whoever acts second holds the power because the party that goes second gets to wait, gets to watch, gets to confirm that the first party actually delivered before giving anything up in return. The one who moves last can always walk away if the other side fails to perform. So underneath every negotiation, there is a quiet, invisible war over one single question: who has to go first? Now I want you to remember how the last Iran nuclear deal worked. The 2015 agreement, the JCPOA. Whatever you think of it, look only at its structure. Iran had to act first. Iran had to physically dismantle centrifuges. Iran had to ship out or dilute its enriched uranium down to an agreed level. Iran had to open its facilities and let international inspectors walk through them and verify with their own eyes that the program had been constrained. And then, only then, after the verification, the sanctions came off and the money was released. Verify, then reward. Iran went first. America held the leverage. Now look at what just happened. Look at the order. Because the order has been completely reversed and America agreed to it. Iran has not dismantled anything. No centrifuge has been inspected. No uranium has been shipped out or diluted. The inspectors are, as of this recording, still not inside the facilities. They have merely been invited this week, and Iran has not even formally committed to letting them in. Nothing on the nuclear side has been verified. Nothing. And yet, the oil sanctions are already suspended. The strait is already reopened. The frozen assets are already moving. The economic rewards, the things Iran actually wanted, have already been delivered. America went first. America paid up front before a single promise on the other side was verified. And the nuclear questions, the entire reason this war was fought, were pushed 60 days down the road to be discussed later after the money was already flowing into Tehran. That reversal has a name. I call it the front-loading trap. You front-load all of your concessions, you deliver everything the other side wanted at the very beginning, and you accept a promise of future cooperation in return. And the moment you do that, you have handed the other side something far more valuable than money. You have handed them the second mover position. You have made yourself the one who has to wait and hope. Let me show you why that is fatal. And to do it, I want to take you back almost 70 years to another great power and another waterway. In 1956, Britain was still acting like the empire it used to be, and there was a waterway, the Suez Canal, that Britain considered essential to its power. It was the artery through which the oil and the trade of the empire flowed. And when the Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized that canal, took it back, Britain reacted the way a great power reacts. It decided to take the canal by force. Together with France and Israel, it launched a military operation to seize the Suez Canal and break Nasser, and militarily, it worked. That is the part people forget. The operation was a tactical success. The forces moved in. The canal zone was being taken. On the battlefield, Britain was winning, and it did not matter at all. Because while the troops were advancing, something else was happening, far away from the guns, in the place where power actually lives. There was a run on the British pound. The value of Britain's currency began to collapse, and the United States, which did not approve of the operation, made a decision. The Americans refused to support the pound. They signaled that they would block the financial help Britain needed to stabilize its own currency. They did not fire a shot. They did not send a single soldier. They simply closed the wallet. And Britain, the empire that had just won the battle on the ground, discovered that it could not afford to keep standing. Within days, humiliated, it agreed to withdraw. It gave up the canal it had just militarily seized. And historians mark that moment, the Suez Crisis, as the precise hour the British Empire ended. Not with a lost war. Britain did not lose the war. It won the war and lost the empire. Because Suez was the moment the world learned, and more importantly, the moment Britain learned, that the age of simply sending the fleet to take the waterway was over. That military superiority no longer translated automatically into control. That there was now a layer above the military, a financial and structural layer that could overrule all the firepower in the world. Now hold that in your mind and come back to this morning. To a president of the United States threatening to send the Navy to seize a strait and collect tolls on it, to take the waterway by force. That is the exact instinct Britain had in 1956. It is the reflex of a power that still believes the era of taking the canal is the era it is living in. And the uncomfortable question, the one I want you to sit with, is whether the United States is about to learn at the Strait of Hormuz the same lesson Britain learned at Suez, that you cannot bomb your way to control of a waterway that someone else is willing to keep closing, that the fleet is not the top of the food chain anymore, and that the last one to understand this is always the empire itself. Let me make the ledger concrete, because I do not want you to take my word for it. I want you to see the actual exchange. What did America give and what did America get? On the give side, America suspended the sanctions on Iranian oil, which is the single most valuable thing Iran wanted because oil revenue is the bloodstream of the Iranian state. America allowed the frozen assets to move. America accepted the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil passes every single day, a strait so narrow, only about 21 miles at its tightest point, that a small number of mines and missiles can shut it. And by signing a framework built on non-interference, America effectively took regime change off the table, the very thing it had openly wished for throughout the war. Now the get side, what did the United States receive in return for all of that? A schedule, a 60-day window in which, at some future point, technical teams will sit down and begin discussing the nuclear program. an invitation for inspectors to visit this week, which Iran has not committed to honoring, and a series of statements from the American president that Iran will agree to inspections, statements that describe a future that has not happened yet and that Iran has not confirmed. Do you see the asymmetry? One side received concrete, irreversible economic relief today. The other side received a calendar appointment and a promise. And here is the detail that should keep American strategists awake at night. The international inspectors have not been able to access Iran's most sensitive nuclear material since the last war. The agency that is supposed to verify all of this has said openly that Iran refused inspections, and notably that it has found no evidence of an active weapons program. Sit with what that means inside this deal. The thing America says it went to war to stop, it cannot currently even see, and it is being asked to deliver every economic concession first, and to trust that after the money has flowed, after the oil is selling, after the assets are unfrozen, Iran will then voluntarily open the doors it has kept closed for over a year. And we already have a preview of how that goes, because in the middle of this very process, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz again. It closed it over the fighting in Lebanon, arguing that America's failure to restrain Israel had already violated the terms. Read that carefully. Iran demonstrated in real time that it can reclose the waterway whenever it chooses and frame that closure as a response to an American failure. The thing America won, the open strait, is something Iran can take back at will and has already taken back once. That is not a concession Iran surrendered. That is a faucet Iran controls, and it just showed everyone that its hand is still on the tap. Let me make the front-loading trap as simple and as physical as I can so that it becomes impossible to unsee. Imagine you hire a contractor to renovate your house, and imagine that, for some reason, you agree to pay him the entire amount, the full price, all of it, on the first day, before he has lifted a single tool, and in exchange, he promises you, verbally, that he will begin the actual work in 60 days. Now ask yourself, on day 61, what is your leverage? What happens if he does not show up? What happens if he shows up, does 10% of the work, then stops and asks for more? You have already paid. The money is gone. The only thing you have left is hope and a promise and maybe a lawyer. Every ounce of your power was in that payment, and you gave it away on day one in exchange for a date on a calendar. That is the position the United States has put itself in. It has paid the contractor in full. The oil sanctions, the assets, the strait, all delivered. And now it waits 60 days for the work to begin. And on day 61, the morning after this window closes, here is the board. Iran will still be selling its oil. Iran will still have its unfrozen money. Iran's economy will be stabilizing with every barrel it ships. And Iran will still be holding the one thing the entire war was supposedly about, untouched, uninspected inside its own borders. So I will ask the question that I genuinely cannot find a good answer to. On day 61, what does America have left to bargain with? The sanctions are spent, the blockade is lifted, the assets are released, every card was played in the first hand before Iran ever had to show a single one of its own. You cannot threaten to reimpose what you have already given away without admitting the deal failed. And the other side knows this. They built it this way. Now, I want to do something I always force myself to do, because if I only show you one side of this, I am not analyzing, I am just performing for you. I want to build the strongest possible case for what America did, because there is one, a serious one. And you deserve to hear it before I tell you what I think it misses. Here is the strongest version of the American argument. First, the oil shock was an emergency, and ending it was worth almost any price. When the Strait of Hormuz was closed during the war, the global economy was bleeding. A fifth of the world's oil was choked off. Prices spiked. Every additional week of closure pushed the entire world closer to a guaranteed recession. At that level of disruption, a downturn was not a risk, it was arithmetic. So you can argue reasonably that America looked at that and said, end it. Stop the bleeding now, stabilize the world economy, and worry about the nuclear details later. Reopening that strait on almost any terms may have prevented something far worse than a bad deal. Second, there is now a direct line of communication where there was none. The framework set up deconfliction channels, including for the dangerous situation in Lebanon. For the first time, American and Iranian officials have a way to talk directly and stop a small accident from becoming a large war, and it may already be working. The peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon reported, for the first time since the fighting there began, a full day with no attacks from either side. That is not nothing. That is real. Third, the 60 days create a structure that did not exist before. It forces technical experts into a room. It gives the pragmatic voices inside Iran, and they do exist, even if they do not control everything, some political cover to make concessions. The theory goes, an Iran that is economically recovering has less reason to play the spoiler and more to lose by blowing the whole thing up. I want to be honest with you, that is not a foolish argument. A reasonable, intelligent person can look at the exhaustion, the oil prices, and the risk of a wider war and conclude that this was the least bad option on the table. I take that seriously. But here is what the steel man cannot account for. It cannot explain why you would surrender every single card before the other player has revealed even one of theirs. Ending the oil shock did not require giving away your leverage permanently and accepting only a promise in return. It required a ceasefire, which is a completely different thing. The steel man cannot explain Day 61. And above all, the steel man cannot explain what we all watched this morning. An American president threatening to seize the strait by force to make Iran disappear as a country, at the very same moment his own Treasury was quietly lifting the sanctions. The threats and the concessions are happening at the same time from the same government. The left hand is making fists while the right hand is opening the safe, and Iran can see both hands. That is not strategy. That is a government negotiating against itself in public, and the other side is simply standing back and letting it happen. So let me bring all of it together. Let me give you the full picture, the convergence, in the plainest words I can. America went to war to end Iran's nuclear program. America has now suspended the sanctions, and the program is intact, uninspected, inside Iran. America went to war to demonstrate its strength in the Gulf. America is now reduced to threatening to charge tolls on a strait it cannot actually hold, a strait the other side has already closed and reopened at will. America went to war to isolate Iran and prove that Washington still sets the terms in the Middle East. America watched the roadmap to peace get drafted with a 4-point plan out of Beijing, watched the pen get held by Pakistan and Qatar, and watched Iran's foreign minister publicly thank China for making it all happen. America went to war to bring Iran to its knees, and the president of Iran stood up this week and calmly announced that Iran will never surrender its right to enrich uranium and that America will simply have to accept it. Every single objective America entered this war to achieve has inverted into its opposite. That is not a run of bad luck. That is what it looks like when a power front-loads all of its leverage, pays the contractor in full, and accepts a calendar in return. The 60-day clock is not a countdown to Iranian compliance. The 60-day clock is the trap, because the clock does not run against Tehran. With every day that passes, Iran sells more oil, stabilizes more, and grows stronger, while America's spent leverage does not come back. The clock runs against Washington. It always did. That was the design. All right, I do not want to only tell you what has already happened. I want to give you something you can hold up against reality over the next few days and test for yourself. So here are 3 things I want you to watch in the next 48 to 72 hours. Prediction 1. Watch Lebanon. The deconfliction channel is the single most fragile part of this entire arrangement, and Lebanon is where it gets tested first. Israel's defense minister has already said that Israeli forces will not withdraw from the security zone in southern Lebanon, and that they remain free to act against threats. That is a loaded gun sitting on the table. If there is any significant Israeli strike in Lebanon in the next 3 days, anything that Iran can frame as a violation, watch what Iran does. It has already shown you the move. It will point to that strike, declare that America failed to restrain its ally, and use it as grounds to slow everything down, or to close the strait again. Lebanon is the first domino. Watch it. Prediction 2. Watch the inspectors. The vice president said the international inspectors would be inside Iran this week. So watch the calendar. If those inspectors actually walk into those facilities in the coming days, then the deal has a genuine pulse, and I will tell you so. But if this week quietly slides into next week and then into once the implementation details are resolved, that is your signal. That tells you Iran is using the 60 days exactly the way the front-loading trap predicts. Collecting the economic benefits now and letting the verification drift, because the verification is the only thing it still has left to trade, and it is in no hurry to spend it. Prediction 3. And I say this completely seriously, Watch the American president's own statements, not Iran's military, because the greatest ongoing threat to this deal is not the Revolutionary Guard, and it is not Russia, and it is not even Israel's hardliners. It is the next threat posted or spoken by the president himself. We saw it this morning. Every time he threatens to seize the Strait or erase Iran as a country, he hands Iran a clean, documented, public reason to claim that the conditions for its cooperation have been disrupted by the other side. He is, without realizing it, building Iran's excuse for non-compliance for them, out loud in real time. Watch how many more times it happens before the 60 days are up. I suspect the answer is many. So let me leave you where we started, with a man on television threatening to take a waterway by force and collect tolls on the ships. In 1956, Britain had that exact same instinct, and it sent the fleet to take the canal. And Britain won the battle and lost the empire, because the world had quietly moved on to a different game, a game played one level above the military, and Britain was the very last to find out. The lesson of Suez was never that Britain was weak. Britain was strong. The lesson was that strength, the old kind, the kind you can measure in ships and soldiers, had stopped being the thing that decides who wins. And the empire that could not feel that shift underneath its own feet walked confidently off the edge of it. The power in this story was never in the carrier strike group, and it was never in the threat to collect a toll. The power was in something much quieter. It was in the ability to read the board, to wait, to let the stronger player spend himself, hand over every card, and start a clock, and then simply outlast him. So here is the question I want you to carry out of this video. When that 60-day clock runs down to zero, sometime in August, ask yourself who will be the one quietly asking for an extension. Ask yourself who will need more time. And then ask the harder question, the one that actually decides these things. Whether that party will even notice in the moment that they are the one doing the asking, okay? That is my analysis for today. As always, this is not prophecy. This is structural analysis. This is game theory laid over a pattern that is older than the United States itself, a pattern that has repeated in empire after empire and has not once broken. Question it. Test it against what you see in the next few days. But watch that clock. I will see you in the next video.